kind of cold out today. Let's use a warmer color for this video. Oh yeah, I like that. What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the returning viewers. If you're brand new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So in today's video, I want to talk about 9 ways that you can improve your hunt for next year. But first, go down into the comments. Let me know how your hunt was this year. Did you get your target buck? Did you get some meat in the freezer? Did you get completely skunked? Let me know. Whatever it was, we can improve on that next year, and we're going to get into the 9 ways that we can do that. Now, these are going to work both on public and private land. The things that we're going to talk about more specifically about private land, about creating things, you're just looking for these things to be naturally occurring on public land if you're a public land hunter. So when we get into food plots inevitably later, you're just looking for those food sources on public land instead of creating them. And when you don't have to create them and just find them, it's a lot less work. It's a lot less involvement of your time, a lot less involvement of your wallet as well. So there's advantages to both public land and private land hunting. Private, you obviously can create exactly what you want, but public, all you have to do is find it, and you can find multiple situations of what you're looking for. So if one gets blown out, you just go to another one. If you screw up a private property though, you don't have anywhere else to go because that was your one shot that you had of having that perfect habitat situation. So let's get into it. So the number one reason why people probably didn't see deer this year is always going to be pressure. So there are 3 things that affect where a deer is in the woods. That is cover, and that is food, and the third thing is pressure. So on opening day of gun deer season, the Orange Army hits the woods, and guess what happens to all of the deer herd? It gets pressured, it gets pushed off of those favorite food sources, it gets pushed out of those favorite bedding areas. Every place you had them on camera coming up into the hunting season, they are no longer there because they switched to their second favorite, third favorite, fourth favorite. They got the heck away from all of that pressure. And so number 1 on the list of creating a better hunt for next year is managing your pressure. So what we want to do is look at how we are getting in and out of our stand locations and make sure that we are keeping in mind not just the wind direction when we're on stand, but where that wind direction is blowing while we're getting in and out of those stands. And I say those as 2 different things because you can have a way you get into a stand and a way you get out of a stand. You can have a way that you get in and out in the morning, and you can have a way that you get in and out in the afternoon. You need to keep in mind that these deer are headed back to their bedding areas in the morning, and they are headed towards food sources right before dark. So we need to keep in mind that we don't want our scent to be blowing off into a bedding area as we're coming in the middle of the day to sit for an afternoon hunt where they're going to be relating to a food source because they're in those bedding areas already. We don't want, even if we're out in an open field, we don't want our scent blasting into a known bedding area because they just won't relate back that direction. They'll go to their second favorite food source or whatever. So we really need to manage how that pressure is being put into the woods. And there's ways that, on top of just thinking about how we're going to get in and out, but you want to make sure you're cleaning all of the debris out of these trails. A snapped stick in the woods is a huge warning to any animal out there because only the big animals in the woods are even heavy enough to snap a stick. So when you step on a stick and it snaps, it's all game over to anything that heard that. They're not even going to wait around to see what it was. They're just going to instantly head the other way. So make sure all those sticks and stuff are cleared out of the way. You really don't want to be brushing up against stuff too, especially with depending on what type of clothing you're wearing. That noise is just so unnatural in the woods. So make sure the way you're getting in and out of these stands is clear of all of the debris, and also just make sure that the path that you are picking and then taking the time to clear out is one where you're not going to be painting scent into an area of the woods where you're going to be spraying these deer out of the woods before you even get to your stand location. And on top of that, make sure that you are picking stand locations that are easy to get in and out of. Don't try to force yourself into a stand location that's going to inevitably bust deer just getting to it. Maybe pull that stand location back to a different location that's easier to get in and out undetected. So for number 2, we're going to start with the things that we can start doing this time of year. So it is December right now, and I do understand that like Wisconsin's bow season still goes for a few more weeks. But if you're done with your season, you can already get into the woods now and start working on these habitat improvements. Or if you're a public land hunter, start looking for these things on public land. And so the thing we can start doing this time of year is getting some of those trees cleared out. So High canopy mature trees offer little support for the deer herd. Yeah, it might be a big mature oak tree that drops a ton of acorns. You might want to leave a couple of those. Don't wipe out all of those off of your property. But the rest of the tree species just offer very little for deer in the woods. It's said that a 60-acre parcel is required to support a single deer if it is all mature trees. But if you cut those trees down and you get some regenerative growth coming up, an acre of regenerative growth can support one deer. So if you want to really improve your deer density on your property and really want to get more deer in front of you and have better chances next deer season, get some of that high canopy down, get some of that regenerative growth going. And again, if you're a public land hunter, just look for where the DNR or the forestry or whoever is in control of that property is in there logging, creating these areas where sunlight's getting down to the forest floor, igniting all of those little soft twigs to pop up those young tender browse sources for the deer herd, because that's exactly where they're going to be. So number 3 brings me to, while you have the chainsaw out in the woods, if you're planning on putting in food plots this next season, you're going to want to get those trees cleared out now. It is a lot easier to clear trees and all of the debris that they create when there are no leaves on them. So if you're trying to open up for food plots, great time of the year to do it right now. But don't just clear out where the plot itself is going. Make sure you're clearing out towards the south too, so that you get all of that sunlight coming down to those food plots. The more sunlight you get into them, the more photosynthesis can happen, the bigger, lusher food plots you're going to get. The two things that depend heavily on food plot growth are sunlight and water, and of course your soil. We'll talk about that later. But the only thing you can really affect in that is that sunlight. You can't make it rain more than it already does, but you can get more sunlight down to that, and that's how you're really going to help those food sources. So again, on public land, you guys don't have food plots, but you are looking for areas of the woods where there's more sunlight hitting the forest floor. You're going to have more available natural browse and food sources for the deer herd in those areas than in those big high canopy areas of the woods. So fourth, we're going to get into frost seeding. So again, if you're trying to frost seed this time of year, you can get that switchgrass frost seeded. You can get that clover frost seeded. That switchgrass needs to go through the stratification process. So getting it on the ground now is going to give it a bunch of warm up and cool down times throughout the season before we get into the spring. And then of course, wetness also puts it through the stratification process. You're really going to get that hardened seed to open up and germinate come spring. With the clover, the same thing. If you want to throw that into your food plots, I personally do not use clover because I like using something that's focused more on the fall hunting season, and where I hunt in Wisconsin, clover is just not as desirable as the other options we have. So any of you that are maybe in more of that snow belt area from like Duluth to upstate New York, you guys are definitely going to want to probably stick away from the clover. But if you are still set on using it, you can frost seed it this time of year. Get it in the ground. It'll come up in the spring with spring green up with everything else, so that you really don't need food that time of year. But it's great for soil building and all of that other stuff too. So great time of year, get out there, frost seed those things into the ground now so that they have the full winter of freeze thaw to actually seep into the soil and get those hardened seeds stratified. So number 5 on the list, we are getting into right before spring green up. So if you did get that switchgrass in the ground, if you want to use chemicals, I'm going to explain how to do this with chemicals in this step. In the next step, I'm going to explain how to do it without chemicals. Personally, I don't believe there's any room for dogma in this industry. If the tool is what's best for the job, I believe in using it. But I also believe in minimizing my chemical use simply because it's expensive, and there are negative effects to the chemicals as well as there's negative effects to the other options of not using chemicals. So it's just, I like to use the best tool in the bag and not have like dogma attached to one way or the other. So with chemicals, you're going to want to get that simazine down. It is a pre-emergent on that switchgrass before spring green up. If it's after spring green up, don't bother because it's a pre-emergent. It's not going to be doing anything. Now, why this is an advantage to us is because those cold weather native grasses are going to come up first before that switchgrass comes up. That switchgrass comes up when it's much warmer out. So you're not going to risk harming that switchgrass, but you are going to have a good kill on all of those other native grasses that are going to compete with that switchgrass. Now you can use simazine on your food plots as well. I recommend not doing it because, again, just reducing the amount of chemicals we use, it's not necessary in my opinion, but you can if you would like to. So after spring green up, that is when that switchgrass is on its own. We don't want to spray it anymore. You can spray with just exclusively 2,4-D if you have broadleaves coming up in it, but do not hit with glyphosate anymore. That glyphosate will kill that switchgrass, especially when it's very young. But in your food plots, we want to spray at least one spraying of 2,4-D and glyphosate. So the reason for this is, especially if this is a first year food plot, you really want to get that first solid kill. All of my northwestern Wisconsin food plots were sprayed one time their first year and then have never been sprayed again. But I needed that first spraying in order to kill off everything in the plots so that I wasn't competing with weeds year after year after year after year after. So I do believe in at least that first spraying just to knock that stuff back and then let your soil be healthy from there on out without all of that weed competition. But that is a great time after spring green up. Don't do it immediately. You want that stuff to be 4, 6, 8 inches tall so that everything kind of germinated in there and you get a solid spray on it. You don't want it to be so thatchy though that when you spray, it's only touching that top layer that's kind of protecting everything underneath, because you're not going to get a solid kill at that point either. But you do want it to have leafed out. Get a solid kill on it. It'll knock it all back, and you should have weed-free plots going into the fall hunting season. Now, if you do come back out there, more stuff grew, yep, you can spray it again. But like I've found a lot of times, that one spraying really does take care of everything for you. So number 6, how do we take care of all of this without any chemicals? So with the switchgrass, you can mow. So what happens is all of those native cold weather grasses pop up right away at spring green up. That switchgrass doesn't get going until later in the season when it warms up. Well, what can you do to set everybody back to an even playing field? It's to mow it. So if you mow all of those native grasses on top of your switch, it's going to set everybody back to an even playing field. And you can continue to mow both the switch and the native grasses up until about the middle of July, late July at the definite latest. And what that's going to do is everybody will be set back to an even playing field. You're going to want to make sure that deck on your mower is set as high as it goes. You're not mowing your lawn here. We do want some growth to remain on this switchgrass here. But what happens is switchgrass, if you guys watch some of my older videos when I'm out on the food plot shooting videos, it's midsummer and that switchgrass is maybe only 2-3 feet tall. But by hunting season, that stuff grows to like over 8 feet tall, with at about 6 feet tall, it being so thick you can't see through it, and it gets a little wispier as it gets taller, obviously. But it is so thick and lush, and most of that growth happens at the later end of summer when all of those native grasses are kind of on cruise control down here or even deteriorating already. And that switchgrass just takes off and outcompetes them, shades them out, and prevents them from growing years later because it's just going to keep them blocked out. Now, the other thing that you can do in your food plots to reduce or eliminate chemical use is to use a summer cover crop or a summer smother crop. But first, you're going to need to deal with those native weeds and that native vegetation. So you're going to have to get out there. You're going to have to disc. You're going to have to till. You're going to have to plow. Using a drag harrow or a cultivator at this stage probably isn't enough to beat up the root systems of all of those native roots. Now, you have to keep in mind, if you're putting a food plot somewhere that's never been processed for growing things before, that it's just 100% native, you are going to have some pretty gnarly root systems in there that you're going to have to bust up. And with disking, tilling, plowing, you are starting to also destroy your soil. You're breaking up the ecosystem that makes that soil so healthy. So it's just choose your poison here. Do you want to choose chemicals, or do you want to choose busting up your soil and destroying all of the ecosystem that's in there that is what's going to help your plants grow? So what you need to do is get in there, turn that dirt over. It'll bring a bunch of noxious weed seeds to the surface. Those will then germinate. You need to get in there, turn the soil over again. Those will that'll bring up even more noxious weed seeds. You have to turn it over again, and so on and so forth. So you're beating up that soil so badly that any natural no-till advantages you had going for you are all out the window at this point. But what you can do is, once you have turned it over a few times, is get a summer cover crop or a summer smother crop in there. You can use things like buckwheat. You can use cereal grains for this. Get them planted in there. They will do kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with the switchgrass. They will grow faster than all of the weeds and stuff in there, and they will choke them out. So make sure those seeding rates are high enough that you have a thick enough density of this smother crop in order to choke all this stuff out. But then you also need to keep in mind what the time is from germination of the smother crop to when it seeds out, because you don't want it to drop its seeds into your food plots either. So you need to ideally time this so that you can terminate something like buckwheat or these cereal grains the same day you plan on planting your fall focused food plot seeds, so that you don't have any lapse in the time of terminating the cover crop until you plant those seeds and they can start germinating right away without any weed competition. So you'll just have to kind of plow disc till up until that plant date of that smother crop, let it grow, plant your fall focused forage mix, and then let that grow into the season for you. So number 7 is something that both public and private land hunters can do if we didn't already lose all of the public land hunters with those last 2 tips. So this is to connect the attraction. So on public land, there are rules and regulations for how you can cut, when you can cut, what you can cut. On many public properties, especially like national forests and such, you can go out and cut trees down. You just have to use a handsaw. You can't use a chainsaw. And so you are able to go out, and if you can identify where your bedding areas are, where your food sources are, this is going to be a huge advantage to you. Now, you can do this on private property too. If you have your bedding areas established, you have your food sources established, you want to connect these attractions with man-made deer trails. And how we do that is simply by opening up a thick part of the woods so that point A to point B is connected. Now, make these bend and weave. Don't make them a big straight line. Deer do not like walking down big straight open areas in the woods that you can see 100 yards in either direction. Make these kind of weave through the woods. You can't see more than 10, 20, 30 yards in any direction. Or if you're in like a more open area, cut some stuff down and just make it harder to move through the other areas, creating this pinch point. So I have other videos on how to create pinch points. I go in much more detail than I'm going to in this video, so you can go check those out. But you really want to create that pinch point. Now, if you're on private, you put a mock scrape, put a water hole in there too to really sweeten up that very specific point in the woods. And ideally, you do want to be hunting these transitional areas or these man-made deer trails that connect attractions instead of the actual attractions themselves. Because, yeah, you can go in on a morning sit, put your stand right in a bedding area, wait for the deer to come back. But if you're not a brown it's down hunter, you have some does and fawns come in, they bed down right underneath you, and you're stuck in your stand until they get up inevitably. And during the day, they'll wander maybe 100 yards or so, browse, and bed back down. But you're reliant on them then moving so you can sneak out of your stand so you don't blow out the whole area. So it's a lot better to sit on one of these areas that's like a man-made travel corridor, man-made pinch point, whatever, through the woods that connects the attractions than actually sitting on the attractions and risking spooking the deer off of there and blowing out those areas and those attractions in the area that you're hunting. Now, 8th on the list is going to be, as we head into August, you're definitely going to need to get those fall-focused food plots planted. But before you do so, make sure you get that soil test, get that lime in there, get that fertilizer in there, get that soil just right so that with that sunlight that you opened up earlier, and then hopefully you get that rain, you have a very lush, attractive food plot that will be the best available food source in the woods, and the deer will 100% relate to that food source over all of the other natural vegetation that is declining at that time. That's why we plant fall-focused food plots, and we plant them at such a late time in the year so that they are still young, tender, nice emerald green out there in the woods when everything else is deteriorating. The leaves are falling off the trees. We're heading into winter quick, and yet the deer have that nice leafy green food source right in your food plot to relate to. So number 9 on the list is your stand and property maintenance. And so this is right before we head into the fall hunting season. You want to make sure all those stands are safe, secure. You want to make sure the way that you're getting in and out of them is all clear, that a tree didn't fall and block one of them, or you got sticks that you're stepping on getting in and out of there. Make sure there's no wasp nests up in those blinds or whatever else you have out there. Just really work on getting everything in tip-top shape, that all of those attractions are at their pinnacle, that they're all thriving and doing what they're supposed to be doing, that those water holes are filled, those mock scrapes are still where they're supposed to be. Get your cameras out there too. Now, I do keep my cameras in the woods almost all year round, just simply because I like to bring the B-roll to you guys here on the channel. But from a pure hunting standpoint, you really don't need your cameras in the woods until maybe a couple weeks before season. And I know guys like to get their cameras out there in the summer. You get to see the fawns, you get to see those bucks in velvet. But then you also have that where some guys will set their target buck on some big velvet buck that they saw in August, and then they never see him again the rest of the season, because when that buck got hard-horned, as that natural habitat of the woods started to deteriorate, that buck went and related to a completely different area of the woods, and he's never coming back to where you got him on camera in August when he was in velvet. So just make sure you're setting your target buck or your appropriate like target for your harvest goals based on what you're seeing right before the hunting season, especially after they are hard-horned, once they're out of velvet, because before that is not where they're going to be during the hunting season anyway. So just make sure you're kind of setting everything appropriately. So also just make sure that those cameras have fresh batteries in them, because you don't want to have to go traipsing through the woods as we're heading into the season just to replace batteries in a camera. And that being said, I'm going to tell you guys a tip here. The difference between alkaline batteries and lithium batteries is that lithium batteries will keep your cameras at 100% battery performance right up until the battery dies, where if you use alkaline batteries, even though they're cheaper, you're going to have a diminishing return as the battery gets lower and lower in power. So if you guys have your cameras set to video, you might notice that videos are getting cut short, or they're not tripping or whatever, and you're missing some pictures on there or whatever. So I really do highly recommend using lithium batteries, even though they are more expensive, simply because you will keep that camera fully functional all the way until the battery dies, rather than getting diminishing returns as that battery loses energy. So if you guys want to check out the cameras I use, I will leave them linked down in the description. If you guys want to check out where I get cheap lithium batteries, I'll leave that link down below too, so you guys can go check that out. And if you guys do use those links to buy those products, I do get a small commission on those at no additional cost to you. So thank you for doing so. It's a great way to support the channel, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.